So you can see from here, so if there's 10,000 tons of emissions, we try to reduce some by internal measures, such as operational improvements and behavior changes, and then the rest we try to offset through various different methods, and we'll go and we'll see a little bit more of that. So the first outcome of the main outcome one of the project was to create awareness within the ADRA network. So we had these two outputs, output 1.1, that is to awareness and decision to pursue carbon neutrality. So this was again taken from the strategy as well, and to assess and analyze ADRA's greenhouse gas emissions. So this also steps from the ADRA's carbon neutral strategy. So the activities that come under the outcome one, well, we had a webinar first. So this was a kickoff webinar that we conducted at the beginning of the project, and then the official decision to pursue carbon neutrality, then creation of climate change commission in each of the 4 offices which are participating, and then assessment on office carbon footprint, that is creation of a organization emissions inventory and calculation of emissions through a customized calculator. So the activity 1.1, this is the webinar we had conducted actually last year. I think some of you were part of it in March 2019. And so it was considered of 2 parts, and so the first part was only for the participants, and the second part was for the rest of the network as well, as an introduction to this concept. And after that, the participating offices, they had their own internal workshops at different parts of this of last year to inform their own offices more about carbon neutrality and this pilot project. And the official decision, so this was basically the adcom of each office had to make the decision to pursue carbon neutrality, and so these were usually taken down in the minutes of the adcom, and it was shared. So this is like the evidence that that each office is going to pursue this. The next was the creation of climate change commission in each of the offices. So what is a climate change commission? We defined their role in a short TOR. So you can see here, so it is to communicate the importance of the pilot to colleagues in the office, to calculate the baseline, to develop an action plan, and to ensure the implementation of the actions to reduce the emissions. So until now, the CCCs have completed their first 3 tasks, and they're actively working to accomplish the 4th task. You can see, we'll see more of that in the presentation as well. So the officers, they formed their CCCs by the 3rd quarter of, so I'm sorry, that's supposed to be 2019. And they have monthly meetings to see the progress on the action plan of the office. So the main challenge of the CCC that they face is that they're time constrained, because most of them have their own other tasks, and this is an additional one, and it's quite difficult to fill it in, but these challenges are something that they're working through, and at the moment this is how we're going, but they've been progressing well. So the next is the assessment of on office carbon footprint, that is to create an organization emissions inventory. So for this project, we had hired a project consultant who developed a calculator tool using Microsoft Excel sheet, and to calculate the carbon emissions from each office. So this was based on the greenhouse gas protocol, which is developed by the World Resource Institute and World Business Council for Sustainable Development. So basically, as you can see here, this 100 kilowatt hour, this is the total electricity spent, for example, in a year, and this is what is called an emissions factor. I'll go to the definition after this on what an emissions factor, and this would be 64.55 kg. So that is actually tons of carbon dioxide emissions. So, so this involves calculating all the major emission sources, but it does not include project emissions. So by this, what we mean is that we are only for this project we decided only to calculate the admin related emissions, because we hadn't it to actually calculate the whole project thing would be a very huge task, because it involved many of the offices we have projects in other countries, so to get all the data would be a very big task. So we decided only to use the admin related data for this, and for the project emissions we decided that since we are developing a project, a climate proofing of projects guide that would help to so to reduce this project based emissions. So the Greenhouse Gas Protocol corporate standard classifies a company's greenhouse gas emissions into 3 scopes. So scope 1 emissions is the direct emissions from company owned or controlled sources, that is diesel generators, boilers, office owned or controlled vehicles, refrigeration and air conditioning. So this tables 1, 2 and 3. So I'll show you the actual Excel tool that we used as well. And scope 2 is emissions, indirect emissions from the generation of purchased energy. And scope 3 is emission all other sources, admin air travel, employee commuting, hotel stay for business travel, waste disposal, etc. So the main challenge to develop this customized calculator is to find the accurate and appropriate emission factors. So what is an emission factor? It's given here. An emission factor is a value that attempts to relate the quantity of pollutant release. So in this case, for example, for electricity in this country, the emission factor is 0.6455 kg of carbon dioxide. So how it works is that we have to calculate first the amount of electricity for the whole year, and then the emission factor. So the thing is, the emission, as you can see here, the emission factors for electricity, hotel use, etc., can vary from country to country. So the thing is, this data is usually available from, for example, the electricity company in your country, from where you get your electricity, and you can ask them. For hotel use, for example, you can get it from some sources in the internet itself. But the key being that if the emission factor is not accurate, then we have a problem in actually calculating accurately what the emission is, the carbon emission is. So it's important to get. The thing is, there's also, for example, a corporate emission factors, you can get it, but then that to get a database like that is very, very expensive. So for this project, we had to our consultant, he helped us to get from different open sources, and he got a lot of this from UK government, greenhouse gas conversion factors for company reporting. And so this is quite standardized in the sense that it can be used quite a bit in Europe and also North America. And then for Madagascar, for example, for this project, we were able to get other emission factors from Madagascar itself. So some of the emission factors like fuel categories, air travel, emission factor, paper types, etc., same all around the world. So that is usually standardized. It doesn't matter from in which country it is from. And so some of the problems we faced while during the assessment is, for example, the smaller offices like Netherlands and Sweden, they share their office space with the union and conference offices. So it makes it difficult to calculate the exact energy for that part. So the solution was to calculate the total area of the whole office, and then only the area of ADRA rooms and office space, and divide the total electricity used by this percentage of area used by ADRA. And the next one was calculating all emissions, including project-related emissions. That is what I was talking about 2 slides ago. And the solution was to calculate only admin-related carbon emissions for this project, and since we're having a separate climate proofing guide to help measure these emissions as well. The next is the calculation of emissions through the customer's calculator, and the activity was done in the through the baseline calculations for the project, which are the emissions from calendar year 2018. So we used the calendar year 2018 as a baseline year to measure the emissions, and all the 4 offices have completed this activity, and this activity was completed by the end of Q4 of 2019, and the project began only in the August 2019. And 2020 will be the year that the changes, so based on the action plans, can be implemented in these offices. And 2020 will be used as the end line year for the project, and the calculations will take place in first quarter of 2021 to see the effect of these changes. So the project has been approved for a no-cost extension until April 2021. So we will take a, here now I'll take you through just a look of this customized calculator. So as you can see here, this is the Excel sheet we have, and so this is how our consultant, you can see here at this part, you can see all the sources that he was getting this from, these emission factors, and here he is given in detail about each table and what it involves. So you can see the 3 scopes here as well: scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. And so here you can each thing is given very in detailed. So then the basic information tab showed it was just basically for each office involved, and the period of calculation is given here, and this was how we calculated it. So you can see here table 1. So just for you all to note, this, the figures given here are for the whole year of 2018 what was used, and you can see it here that how much fuel was used, so what kind of fuel. So here what needed to be done is there was a drop box here, and you can he developed a drop box, so if you, depending on the type of fuel, you could change it like this, and then the emission factor would automatically change as well. So this is how it was developed, and in each table, so for example table 1, this was used to measure the fuel sources, so from stationary sources, that is for heating, ovens, diesel generators. These, so from each of the countries which had data for this, we could get this. And as you can see, so this was in Madagascar, they used, for example, diesel. So you see the liters, how many liters, and the emission factors given here. It comes automatically. So this is how it was created this. So you can see the different type of oils here, and here also you can see the types of fuels: gaseous fuels, liquid fuels, and solid fuels. So this was how it was called. So table 1 was for the emissions from stationary sources, and table 2 was from passenger vehicles. So these included only vehicles that were owned and controlled by ADRA officers. So based on that, so they had the different categories of car as well: the large cars, average car, small bike, medium bike. As you know, in some of the offices in Asia, for example, we have even motorcycles are there that can, so even for that we can see the fuel type. You can select in the drop box here the various types of fuel here. This is so only from ADRA owned and controlled vehicles. So you can see the mileage for the year and the emissions factors, and this is in carbon dioxide in terms of tons, and then this is in liters also. You can see here for ADRA Germany, because there's 2 vehicles, for example, for diesel and for petrol, and so this had to be done like this. And The next one was, this was actually, there was no data. This was just an example, for example. And this is for about air conditioning and equipment and or refrigeration equipment. This is another table that can also be filled for the emissions from these things. The next one was from purchased electricity, steam, heating, and cooling. So for example, if you see here the different energy sources, you can see solar. So ADRA Germany has been using solar power for the last, I think, 8 or 9 years. And at this point in time, they are completely energy efficient. So they actually give back power to the grid. So you can see here the total emissions are zero in this. So this is how it is. So they have invested in solar energy maybe almost 8 or 9 years ago, and this is, you can see now their electricity, they don't need to purchase electricity anymore. In fact, they can get income from that. So you can see the different countries here. And table 5 is about business travel. This is probably one of the big emissions that happen for most of the offices, I guess, the travel. So long haul, you can see different types of long haul, short haul, and then here you see different average passenger, economy class, premium economy, business, first class. And this is for flights. And this is only for business travel related to flights. So you can see here the total emissions as well. And the next table is the business travel related with passenger cars or trains. So you can see a cab you have here, a national train you have, bus you have, and these are the different types of emissions that have been calculated in terms of kilometer as well. And this is for table 6. And table 7 is emission factors related to business travel, the hotel stay in the various countries. So you can see this all admin related travels. So Slovakia, Thailand, Brussels. So here are the emission factors for the different countries that we could find from online. This is the free one which we could get. This is quite accurate for, I think this was for the year 2018. So emission factors also vary from year to year. So which is why it's important to have updated data as well. So you can see this is a different emission factors and emissions for hotel stay as well. And the last one is for the trash or the garbage, the different types. So you have paper, mixed, and what type of recycling that they do as well. So you can see what is the major emission here is from paper from the mixed one, you can see here. So so this is just a short overview. So this one was just a summary. I'll show it to you in the slideshow again, this one, from all the 4 offices. Yeah, so you can see here, these are from all the 4 offices. We have the emissions. You can see ADRA Germany had the biggest ones, especially if I would say a lot from the business travel, both air and land. So this is what it comes to the most. And so the total for the 4 offices, it was 228 tons of carbon dioxide emissions. So this is what was reported. This was the as of 2018, the year 2018. This was the emissions report for us. The next is the outcome 2 was create a climate carbon reduction model. So this is a practical guide on model for ADRA offices, include climate proofing for projects. So these are the various activities. I will just go through them as well. So first is to develop and endorse practical guide. So this activity is currently being carried out, and it's hopefully finishing by the end of July 2020. And And the aim is to create a step-by-step guide to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions in network offices around the world and in their projects. So the greenhouse gases can be reduced for ADRA offices using this GHG protocol. This is what we saw in the table, and for ADRA projects using various methodologies to mitigate and adapt to climate change. And that is the climate proofing of projects, which I'll show you just after in a few slides. So this was the main contents that we agreed upon for this carbon reduction and climate proofing guide. As you can see, it takes into consideration the how ADRA operations are, and for the projects, because you can see number 7, climate proofing of ADRA projects. So this is what we had planned for. So the next one is to implement actions for the carbon reduction within the office. So this is the CCC is responsible for this, and they have developed action plans to reduce their emissions. So based on the baseline that was calculated, they have to reduce it, see how they can reduce it. And so these action plans also have been approved by each ADRA office's respective ADCOM. So ADRA Germany and ADRA Madagascar have already begun to implement some actions to reduce carbon emissions. So some examples including changing to LED energy efficient bulbs, improving insulation in office windows, and controlling or reducing the printing of paper. But each office representative, after this, they will present about the various actions that they've taken. So you can see in a practical way what is being done in these offices. The next is climate proofing of projects. So this is the again the guide that is supposed to come. So the consultant will prepare a guide about this. So what is climate proofing? It is a process to make projects, strategies, policies, and measures resilient to climate change, including climate variability so that is to identify the risks and minimize climate change risks and optimize adaptation, that is climate risk screening, and increasing these ways into programming and project, that is to mainstream as well. So it will provide a comprehensive description of the main roles, regulatory issues, policies, actors, and planning processes related to ADRA network, like partner offices, donor offices, and the major donors. So the project partners will provide feedback to the project consultant before this document can be finalized and shared. So the outcome 3 is to provide sustainable, environmental friendly income generation sources, carbon credits. These are for ADRA. So these are the very different activities, and we'll just take a look at this as well. This is the final outcome under this for this project. So external certification of emissions reduction pilot project in Madagascar. So it requires the registration of the project. So this involves actually planting of mangroves. You will see that's the next activity. It requires a registration of the project by a third-party organization. So this third-party organization, we need to register with them in order to be able to generate carbon credits, and in order to be able to verify the project. So some of the vendors are verified carbon standard, VCS gold standard, and Plan Vivo Foundation to register and certify such projects. So initially we had planned to register this project with Plan Vivo Foundation since they were the most cost-effective solution, and we had actually interactions with them through by email, and we were constantly in touch with them. So according to them, the steps involved for this registration certification process is to develop and submit a project idea note, and then to submit a project design document. We'll see that a bit, and with technical specifications. So actually, this is quite a technical aspect of it, and requires maybe a consultant or somebody who has a little bit more technical expertise in this. Then validation, registration, annual reporting, and verification. So you can see the cost of this thing. So it's actually quite a expensive process if you take it in a long term. And this is how these are the costs involved. So for the various steps, you can see here the various costs involved. So if you see the total, it comes to only what is here, like until the registration, it comes to maybe about $7,000 or $8,000, but this doesn't include the each time you need to the issuance fees for the various carbon credits. So the income, when it comes to carbon credits, we have to share the income with the community that is in the field. So that is the place where you're going to uh, plant the trees or the mangroves. You need to share the cost, the income from there with them. And the Plan Vivo, for issuing the credits, then they take per credit, they have some certain price here. You can see here, 40 cents. If it's less than 50,000 or more than 50,000, it's 35 cents. We can go into more detail a little bit later. So this doesn't take into cost, of course, the hiring of consultants or subject matter experts. So this is which is quite necessary for this kind of project, as we found out as well, because there are some very specific technical specifications that are needed to be calculated during the submission process. And so after contacting the person at Plan Vivo, it became clear that we could not officially register the project because of these three factors: that is small planting area, long-term commitment, and costs. I'll go into more detail about that later. And so the agreed upon solution was for us to follow all the procedures for the registration, that is to fill up the project idea note and the project design document and complete a mock registration to understand the practical challenges and the various steps involved in this process. Because as this is a pilot project and a learning project for our ADRA network, we thought we need to go through each process just to make sure we know how how each step goes and what are the challenges and the difficulties that we can face. So that can be a learning for each of us. And this would serve as internal capacity building and future for planning of similar projects. So the carbon reduction activity in Madagascar. So this is the deforestation of mangroves, was the carbon reduction activity that was to take place in Madagascar. And one full-time staff is there, who's in Madagascar on the ground there in the area. And ADRA is working with Greener Madagascar, a local NGO on the ground there as well. And the mangrove replanting is being done in consultation with the local government and local community members as well. And Rado from ADRA Madagascar, he'll give us more details during his presentation, which is at the end of, which is after this. And the thing is, the next activity is generated carbon credits retired to offset emissions of 4 ADRA offices. So this is another activity is connected with activity 3.1, that's the external certification of the project. So due to the problems related to the external certification, we will not be able to generate any official carbon credits in this project. As mentioned earlier, we were showing exactly this. Since it's a learning project, we want to show each step. And so that we'll be able also, since we are following each of the step, we will be able to calculate also how many carbon credits we can get. So what is a carbon credit here? We can see here, 1 carbon credit is equal to 1 ton of carbon dioxide. So after the calculation of the end-line survey, we will know how many carbon credits can be retired based on the number of trees planted and how many of them survive as well. So you can see what is this? 1 carbon credit is 1 ton of carbon dioxide. So the project challenges and the lesson learned till date, you can see planning ahead. So it's very vital, especially if you're planning to register the project and to generate carbon credits. So the process needs to be done from the conceptualization. So there needs to be a feasibility study as much as possible, because then we know the assessment, so biophysical and social assessment, before undertaking such a project. So because the various issues can come up, so like the long-term commitment of the developer, community that lives there in the proposed reforestation site, and if they have any conflicts related to this, and types of soil, mortality rate of the saplings that we want to plant, species to be planted. So each of this, to know all this, it's better to have to undertake a feasibility study before, especially in the area where if you plan to do reforestation. Another challenge we face is the coordination and communication. So this project is taking place across 4 different ADRA offices and different time zones as well. So it's been a bit of a challenge, but we are moving forward uh, after learning from these challenges. The next is the project timeline. So 1 year was actually which was given to us for this project, but that was quite short, and we didn't know exactly, as we said, we didn't know exactly how long things would take. So at that point, we had asked for 1 year, and 1 year was approved by ADRA International for this project. So we have asked for a no-cost extension, and that goes till April 2021. So we see at least 3 to 4 months is required to calculate the baseline, and then 1 year to implement the actions and activities to reduce carbon emissions, and another 3 months to calculate the end line. Yeah, so this is what is required. And personal time commitment in percentage. So each office, the project in charge, there was just taking 5% of time, which is actually almost nothing. And because of this was again because of challenge, since it's a pilot, we didn't have that much money as well. So this, according to my recommendation, at least we need somebody in the office who's actually at least there part-time to take care of this project. So at least 40% time commitment, that would help, because there needs to be a person there for the calculation of emissions, and also to ensure that these actions are being implemented in each of the offices to reduce the emissions. So it's good to have at least one person who is there for part-time for this kind of position. And the next is registration and third-party certification. So this is another challenge that we faced, as I explained earlier. So it requires a long-term commitment of at least 20 years from the project developer. In this case, the project developer is ADRA Madagascar, and according to this third party that we wanted to use, Plan Vivo Foundation, they said to register a project, it requires at least 20 years commitment from the project developer. So this is something we need to take into consideration when we want to register a project. It requires a long-term commitment, and which means also that means a commitment from the community where you're going to which is going to help you with this reforestation as well. And the planting area should be a minimum of 250 hectares to be economically viable. So this project we have had only 50 hectares, which is a very small area. And according to a contact person in this third-party organization, Plan Vivo Foundation, he said it's not this such a small pilot project. He said it's not worth doing it, because he said it will not be economically viable. You would spend more money in trying to register the project, and the cost for verification would outweigh the actual benefits, that is to generating the carbon credits. So a consultant with experience or a subject matter expert would be advisable to hire, since some of the information required for the registration is very technical. An adequate budget allocation, since cost involving verification and validation for the project registration need to be undertaken every few years. So this is just a small graph that you can see. So this is showing just 12 years, but then it goes beyond that as well, the various crediting periods. So I've seen the Plan Vivo Foundation, their website, they have various projects that have been registered, and usually it's for a bigger area, and they require some commitment from this long-term commitment from a organization on the ground there. So with this, I think my presentation is complete. So thank you for your attention. So the next, we will have presentation from the participating officers, and then the Q&A session will be after that presentation. And yeah, so now I will hand over to the time to Anna from ADRA Germany, and she will continue.
Yeah,
this
thank you,
presentation.
Joseph. Joseph, are you going to?
Yes.
Are you going to project the presentation for me?
Yes.
Okay. And how am I going to switch the slides? Excuse me.
You can I can give, there's a remote, and I can give you as well. So yes. Okay. So now you can switch the slides by yourself. You can check. Yeah.
Okay, great. So my name is Anna from ADRA Germany. Joseph already presented quite a lot, and what I'm going to do is just to tell you a little bit what we actually done in ADRA Germany with all this planning and with all the activities. So because you had some concrete questions on what could be done and how we could do this. Excuse me. This PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, so can you see the first slide? There was a question about the size of organization. You can see that ADRA Germany has bigger emissions just simply because we are a bigger organization in a size. ADRA Madagascar is also quite big in terms of the number of people, but ADRA Germany as a supporting office travel a lot, and you will see that majority of our emissions are actually our flights. And this is just our administrative flights, as Joseph mentioned. So all our project flights, monitoring trips are not included here. And you can imagine, initially we calculated with the projects, everything together because we were not sure if we should separate the admin and the project emissions, and it was above 300 tons, something like that, I think 350. Then we separated and we have 114. So our biggest emission is our flights and also the biggest emission is actually the travel. And second after this is the air flights. For the travel, you see 66 tons. They include commute of our employees to work, which constitute the biggest emission in this case. I think about 44 tons is the commute of our staff to work, which is the baseline for 2018. Then after this, we also have other own vehicles, our trips within Germany, a little bit of hotel and a little bit of waste. So you see the biggest source of emission, at least for our office, but also for the other offices, if you compare, is travel in different ways. So this is our climate change committee, 6 people. What we have done so far, we took an official decision to pursue carbon neutrality as ADRA Germany. We formed our climate change committee, there is a picture there. We had presentation and discussions in ADRA Germany, and we have monthly meetings of our climate change committee. I should say that awareness took some time in ADRA Germany because we had to explain what is the project about, what are the challenges, why are we doing it. So it took significant amount of time, several months, I would say. Then after this, we developed ADRA Germany carbon reduction plan for ADRA Germany, for our organization, which I'm going to talk a little bit about now. So first of all, we looked at the energy and the heating. We were looking at switching off the lights, unplugging the electrical sockets. We also were talking about the making stickers and written notes to put on the wall to remind the people to switch off the electrical appliance. For the awareness, we had some awareness workshops during our kickoff for the employees on. Excuse me, what is going on? Joseph, can you please help me with the slides? I don't know.
Okay, 1 minute.
Yeah. And next one, thank you. So just keep it there. And can you switch your background noise if it's possible? Because
I just.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we're talking about making some stickers. Joseph. Okay, just keep it here for some time. Also, we had a meeting with employees, some discussions, and we agreed to replace inefficient light bulbs with LED by 2021, which will probably go beyond the life of this project, but we are in a process because it requires significant financial resources. Next slide. Yeah. For the energy and heating, we also agreed to create a process. So in ADRA Germany, we create a process, Landschaft, which is where we write down all our policy and all our operational structures. So we're going to create one about the procurement only efficient equipment, energy efficient equipment. Also, we're going to procure switchable socket outlets. We were looking at efficient heating. ADRA Germany is heated by gas. And we were looking at the better isolation between our buildings, because in our compound we have several buildings, and between the buildings there is an isolation tube which is losing some heating, and so we have to pay a little bit more. So we're looking into that. We have not done it yet because it's a quite a significant expense, but we are looking into this maybe in the future. Also, we're looking at hydraulic balancing of the heaters. So the heaters permanently show the same temperature. Also about the limiting our heaters to 22 degrees Celsius. Renewing our window gaskets. Maybe it's a problem for the northern offices where all our heating is going through the windows, because the ceiling of the window is not as efficient as it used to be, because we have the windows that are 30 years old. Also, we were looking into installing temperature regulators on the heating bodies. The next. Travel and logistic. Travel and logistic is our biggest emission, so we were looking at some significant reductions here. We are talking about evaluating a number of the project trips that can be necessary per person. Also, we were looking into home office, and in ADRA Germany we have a policy that 2 working days per week could be requested as a home office. So we are looking at the policy to encourage employees actually to request the home office. And yeah, we have now COVID-19, which has significantly improved our rates of people working in home office, which basically almost everyone. So we're going to see improvements in our end line just because of the COVID, but I think it also will help to realize us how much we could do remotely from our home office. We will evaluate this experience of home office after we return to the office, but so far it been seemed to be working. We encourage this process, and we are working on the policy how to make working from home more attractive to our employees. Also, we're encouraging our employees to commute to work by bicycles, public transport, and carpooling. As you remember, 44 tons of CO2 coming from the commute of our employees to work. For our employees, we are paying 50% of the public transport ticket if the person decides to come to work with a bus or train. Also, we used to have a card which was something like on top of our salary with 40 euro for the fuel of the employees to support them getting to the office. We discussed this, and in order not to further support fossil fuels, we replaced this card by 44 euro coupon for some other services or items, but not fossil fuel based. I would like to mention that this changed was quite a big challenge, because in the beginning our employees they had some reservations. So now we pursue carbon neutrality, and it means our card for the fuel will be cancelled. So people started to be uncomfortable with this, especially some of us who are living quite far away from the office and have to use the car. So by finding this replacement, it was quite a good solution of, I would say, of our management. So there was we did not deduct anything. We provided an equal option, but the option doesn't support fossil fuels. The next one. Also, no, the one before. The one before. Thank you. The next one. Yeah, thank you. So we also providing our employees with the train cards. In Germany, we have a train cards, and these train cards give you, it is like the sale card. So you can buy you buy it for a year, and you have a discount in traveling by train by 25% or by 50%. So every year we calculate how long people are traveling, how much people are traveling with a train. And if it is financially viable, the person can have for work 25 or 50% reduction in the train card. Reduction in air travel. We noticed some of our trips in Germany that are less than 600 kilometers are done by flight, which is not necessarily an efficient way. And we introduced this rule that below 600 kilometers, travel should be done by train as a rule, and we are looking into finalizing this in the process in our policy. Of course, there can be happen that there will be exception to this rule, but in general, we would like to keep it as a rule. We are also trying to bundle, to put the trips together. And for some trips with a short duration of time, we usually encourage the employees to ask if there is a digital possibility to participate in a trip. Like, for example, we have some meetings in Brussels, which is from ADRA Germany, about, I don't know, about 4.5 hours. And the meeting can be 2-3 hours. So we usually inquire if you can participate digitally. Yeah, we're also looking at now for the travel agent who could help us offset carbon emissions. There are some travel agencies that are offsetting carbon emission if you buy the ticket from them. We were researching on this and we found one. You see the link below, but it does not. This travel agent does not do full recovery of CO2. It only takes. It only offsets 300 tons. No, 300 tons. No, excuse me, something less. Yeah, in fact, it only offsets 10% of long haul flights. This travel agency is going to work on this more and to create better offset modalities, and we are also looking for other counterparts, but we are still researching. If you're interested, you can click on the link below and take a look at this travel agent. I'm pretty sure they also have English as a language. The next one. Yeah, we will also looking into reduction of the paper consumption, sorting the paper or sorting the printing on essential and non-essential, digitalizing the process. We are now creating a new in a cloud database for our project, which will hopefully help us to reduce a little bit the printing. We are yet to establish a basket or the place where misprinted paper or draft paper can be kept and can be reused. We by default have our printer settings on the double paper. No, excuse me, I did not finish back. Yeah. And we also looking to procure a press for the paper because we have the ADRA shop where we have a lot of cardboards and would like to press them together to avoid multiple trips to the disposal place. The next one. Yeah, for the plastic use, we are looking for more sustainable takeaways options, not in a styrofoam, not in plastic packages, or local catering, reusable utensils. I can remember recently we had one meeting where we invited local organic provider, where they provide the catering without any plastic options. It costs a little bit more, and we're still looking for the options, but it is possible. We're also looking at buying refill pens, the more sustainable pens for writing. Separation of bio-waste and other types of waste. As you know, in Germany, we're separating the waste. So our problem was that sometimes employees do not separate waste properly, and our garbage collection service doesn't pick up our waste. So we are looking at more awareness there because it will greatly reduce our costs in the waste. Also, sustainable procurement in the office. We have a fruit basket, for example, in our kitchen, and we're looking at replacing bananas or some kind of exotic fruits with more sustainable local produce from the local farmers. Also buying bio and fair trade and sustainable production coffee and tea, having some cooperation with the local farmers. Yeah, and as I said, bio-friendly packaging and plastic-free. The next one. Yeah, we're also looking at sustainable shipping. We started to look at it end of 2019, and as soon as the COVID will allow us to meet together, we will look further for the options. Also, we are going to define our minimum procurement standards, And we are looking at where our products are actually coming from during the procurement process. The next one. Yeah, and I think one of the last one, we were thinking that we need to create ADRA Germany vision in terms of the carbon neutrality in environmental, environment. As ADRA Germany, we do not have environmental policy, but we are planning to write one, maybe as the RTLL for the network, and this could be applicable to the several offices. What we have now is with our climate change committee, we are doing weekly updates through our digital social networks in ADRA Germany. So we use Yammer, we use Microsoft Teams, and we have weekly update about the activities of our climate change committee, and also about some simple activities the employee can implement for the carbon neutrality, either in office or in private life. You see here is one post of the CCC where we suggested a seasonal vegetable calendar for the people, for example. That was one way to encourage the awareness and the behavioral change. And I think that is all. No, there is a last slide. Yeah. We also thinking at the creation climate-friendly gardens. In ADRA Germany, we have a little garden space beside our office. So we're looking into this. And the big tasks, the task that we are looking into is to calculating CO2 emissions for each project, for flights, logistics, and create projects CO2 neutrally. For this one, it will take a little bit more time to develop because we're also writing this guideline on CO2 neutrality in the projects. But this is a big task, and I think this is the biggest way to awareness, to create to calculate the CO2 emissions and also sequestration. So how much our project emit CO2 and how much our project are able to sequestrate. If you could calculate the total, that could be a great marketing tool that we could communicate, but we are still on the way there. So thank you so much. That's all from ADRA Germany side.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Now, next, I think Reem will present for ADRA Sweden.
Yes, hi everyone. Can you hear me? Joseph?
Yes, Reem, I can hear you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So from our side, first thanks to Joseph and Anna, you have covered a lot. I would start by saying we are, first I'm Reem from ADRA Sweden. I work as programs director. And in our office, we are about 5.5 people working. So it's a very, very small office, but we have quite a lot to do. As you can see, we from the table that Joseph and Anna has provided in regards to our CO2 emission calculation, the biggest emission factor is our travel by air. And that's what we have been trying to focus on reducing, aside to the other points. But in general, it's been a very interesting experience for us because we took this pilot in order to understand how we can reduce our emissions in the different areas. And to also see the different ADRA offices, how they are working, how they're doing their operations, and how they're planning to reduce it. So it is a learning process for us. There is a lot to do, but we will not be able to do so much at the point. And that's due to some limitations we have. One of them is that we are still part of the church, the union. And we co-share our office with them also. So a lot of the things that we might want to do in regards to having efficient electricity, for example, use and other things. They're not totally up to us, it's up to the church. So what we can do is give recommendations and negotiate with them. Other limitations are also, as we are a very small team, we are only 5 people. So our team is the CCC, the Climate Commission team, and we are also the outcome. So you can imagine how much time we would need just to discuss, from all of us, just to discuss some action points in regards to this pilot. So just to start with the electricity point on our action plan. Before I start, our action plan is drafted and it's been discussed by the CCC outcome. We are yet to officially finalize it. So we have not officially started doing our activities, but yeah. So our first point in regards to electricity, we have had a very small emission when it comes to electricity, and that's due to the whole country as Sweden having a very low emission factor. In Europe, I think it's the 2nd or 3rd country having a very low emission factor. So, and that's because Sweden has very much invested on renewable energy, and so the emission factor is very low. When it comes to our activities to electricity, we have thought, you know, to raise awareness among our staff and also the staff of the church that we co-share the office with. And in regards to switching off lights, computers when we have longer breaks and things like that. And also providing recommendations to the church when it comes to for example, changing old windows and the heaters and things like that, the lighting also. You can go to the next slide. When it comes to logistics, as you have seen, we have our highest emission factor is travel, and it's travel by air. And it was quite a wake-up call for us also to realize how much we travel. And this travel is all only for our operation as ADRA Sweden office. So there's no travel connected to projects that was calculated here. It's only our operations. So most of the travel, traveling within Europe by air is, of course, amongst the highest contributor, but also the long haul travel going, for example, to the US or to Thailand and things like that. And as we are a very small team and trying to be very engaged in the ADRA network, some of us are part of, our office is part of the advocacy group, the resilience working group. We were part of PDAC until last year, and the health group. So it also takes on, when we are part of these groups and learning labs, when they happen to meet in person, then, traveling is required, and that puts on also, increases the emission factor from our travel. So what we have thought about is that to avoid travel for short trips, especially within Europe, and for the purpose of 1 or 2, 3 days meetings, we're thinking to have it prioritized to be conducted online, virtually, unless it is a very important meeting that needs to be conducted in person. And with that, we want to develop guidelines and checklists to, okay, what do we prioritize when it comes to traveling? So using trains as first choice or carpools within Sweden, which we already do very well actually. All of us commute by trains and buses, and trains in specific have very low emission factor. And then we have been also discussing meetings within the ADRA network, especially the ones in Europe, if we can have, when we are part of these different groups, that we agree on countries that are quite more central, where people can commute by trains rather than flying. That's a suggestion. We also talked about including or having a CO2 compensation to absolutely necessary air travel outside Europe. So in that sense, we're thinking, okay, so for these important travels, then we need to compensate. Then we talk about reducing travel budget and setting travel priorities checklist. This is pretty much connected to what I just mentioned, but regarding the long whole travel distance, depending on the purpose of the travel, but most of the time it's mostly for meetings or having workshops or conferences and things like that. So reducing these travels could be done by, for example, having local experts doing what is necessary that, rather than flying and having an international person. Also conducting virtual meetings for those that can be done, and compensating these absolute necessary travels. And as I mentioned, I want us to reevaluate our ADRA network engagements with the different groups and the meetings that we plan to have in real life. And especially for meetings and workshops that, for example, have more than 3 days planning, then having clear agendas and purposes for these meetings ahead of time, so one knows exactly, you know, have the right expectations and things like that, because it has happened that some of the ADRA network meetings, how do you say, like they took place, but with agendas and purposes being shared at the last minute, so people travel already have booked and things like that, and travel and then become disappointed of what the meeting is really about. So yeah, this is more of a suggestion to the network. You can move to the next slide. And then we have thought also about our work as ADRA Sweden, even when it comes to our projects. As we mentioned, our calculation to the CO2 emission only, it had a boundary to our operations as ADRA Sweden. But thinking broader, we are thinking to have this environmental policy with its guidelines in regards to ADRA Sweden and also our partners and our projects. And with that, we encourage, of course, environmentally friendly activities, having CO2 compensation included in the project design already for travel, because within projects you do travel by land and by air when necessary, of course. And then having also, or reducing our monitoring trips, or having a combined trips to monitoring trips, so that when we do our field visits, then we combine them with other purposes. For example, workshops that have been planned, and we can have them happen at the same time to reduce the amount of travel and things like that. Yeah. And then also part of this is to raise our awareness as ADRA Sweden, and we want to do that for example, when we do now our second calculation to our CO2 emission, then we can see exactly, okay, how much each staff has traveled and what is their CO2 emission and where does it come from and things like that. So it is more of a motivational factor to the employee to see that, okay, I'm emitting this amount and it doesn't feel good, it's not right. What can we do? So it's more of this ownership feeling, and also to prioritize what can be done as an employee. So the employee coming with a suggestion as well, as they can see, okay, this is my footprint. Just one comment which I've seen in the discussion here, which is the reduced travel that is now taking place because of COVID-19. It is, of course, amazing how much we can do virtually and from home, but this will also, like, what's his name? Someone in the chat mentioned, our reduced travel will not be part of our action plan. It's because of an outside factor, which is COVID-19. So even though when we do our CO2 emission calculation for 2020, it will show a very, very low emission factor from travel, but it is because of an outside factor. And that will kind of hinder our, not hinder, but it will not project the real action and activities that we are able to do and we will do once the lockdown, for example, is over. So that's a concern from my side, but of course it is a positive thing that it has contributed to the very huge emission globally. I think that's it from my side.
Thank you, Reem. Next we'll have from ADRA Netherlands, Geert, I think.
Yes, good afternoon, morning, evening, everybody in the network, in the webinar. As being the last, a lot of being said, so I'll keep it short. This is my team. As you can see, only females are helping me. The rest is all part-time. From communication, the third person is responsible for the Child Foundation. The third lady is Stella for project management and for in-gathering and management assistant. The fourth lady is doing is a volunteer for being administrative for the Child Foundation, and below on the left side, Irma for the bookkeeping, and on the right, fundraising. As said, they are all part-time. I'm the only one who is full-time. We've gone through the CCC because everybody, as we've been a small office, everybody is also part of the EDCOM and part of the CCC Commission. So we've looked at all the possibilities, as mentioned, from Germany and from Sweden. But we also looked at some other things, and one of the things is that when we do compensation, it's of course in Madagascar. But I said, well, what if we can do at our own place? So we have a community center started in January, so it's recently. It's called ADRA Share and Care. We still have to pay. The building is for free. It's from the union, so we don't have to pay rent or mortgage or whatever. But the utilities we have to pay. So we said, what if we can change to solar energy? Now the roof is not compatible for that, so we are looking at the possibility at the school, which is about 200-300 meters from that. It has a flat roof, so we are discussing that possibility, which would be good for the school and which would could be very good for our community center. And the second thing is we are in a building which is, well, the original building is from 1674, and it has a huge, well, as you call, garden or place around it, many hectares, which garden, which trees. And I've done a request that we could plant some trees so we could do the offset not only far away, but also on our own premises. We've got permission for that, but it's only for a small part. I'm looking for other ways on the same premises, but that's one of the things we are thinking and talking about. And the third action plan is to investigate for planting trees in the Netherlands. There is a huge organization who is responsible for, well, probably 60 to 80% of all the forest in the Netherlands. And we are discussing at the moment what kind of way there is that we could compensate our own carbon emission in the Netherlands. Next one. Reduced travel. Both Anna and Reem has been talking about it. The COVID has changed the world, but the good thing is that we will look very much deeper in it and see what kind of possibilities there are if the COVID has been over, and how we can stay to the system which we have now, Zoom, Teams, etc., and where it's really, really necessary that you say, okay, I need to travel to somebody else in another place in the world. Like if we have projects together and we have a few countries where we work together, then of course monitoring can be done, and then most of the time it's already done by one country and not that you travel together, unless it's really a value asset that you travel together. Of course, bike, bus, train will be the first option if we need to travel. All right. And I think that's my last slide. Of course, this is talking about which was not always done. We are in the building of the union. We rent 2 rooms. We have one payment where is the rent, energy, cookies, coffee, etc., etc. So it's not really that we can calculate on one side, but also not that we feel if you use more or less electricity or heating. But when we have started this pilot and talked in the group, I put on some posters in the rooms everywhere, and now as soon as we leave the building, the computers are down, the heating is down, even it's in the winter time. And I asked the union also to change the light bulbs, which will be done probably. I think that's it, or did I have one more? Yeah, that's it. Okay, thank you. And if there are questions, just let me know.
Okay, thank you, here. Now we hear from Rado from ADRA Madagascar.
Hello everyone, can you hear me?
Maybe little louder.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to present now the actions that have been taken in Madagascar, but as well the carbon offset activities. So for in difference to the 3 of the offices, we are in implementing office, so we have some projects ongoing. So the carbon calculation have been done only for the administration, not the project that we are implementing. And at country office level, we have created the climate change committee, and it's not fully functional. We have calculated as well from the country office only, not the projects. And at the country office level, we have installed new printers per floor. Before, we had personal printers, each of us, like about 50 people, has their personal printers, and a lot of paper have been used. So now that we have those new printers, we can put code, and we have like a quota for each of the individual in the office, so that they don't print everything all the time. Also, the country office have put in all the cars GPS, so that we can monitor our fleet to be able to reduce a little bit our traveling by car around Madagascar, because all of the projects are in Madagascar. Joseph? Next slide. So in Madagascar now we have 6 country offices, 6 field offices that are managing several projects. So we are in the process to create the CCC committee in each of those projects, because they are actually the one that consume the most carbon, that emit the most carbon. So so we have as well 2 projects in Madagascar, one funded by Food for Peace, where ADRA International and ADRA Madagascar are committed to make the project carbon neutral. So we use match funds from ADRA International to do the carbon offsetting activity, so that the project become a carbon neutral project. We are intending to do as well the same project that is funded by BMZ and ADRA Germany, to make those 2 projects then carbon neutral. And the last thing that we want to do for now at regional office level is to prepare a carbon neutral strategy for them to implement all of the activities that the country office cannot manage all of the emission from each of the project. Now I'm switching to the activity that actually is managed by the 4 country offices. So we put in place an activity for a plantation of mangrove for 50 hectares in the south of Madagascar. The idea of the carbon offsetting project is to implement projects that produce reduction in greenhouse gases compared to the greenhouse gases that would be emitted by the country offices that are participating in this project. So those carbon offset projects can include, for example, tree planting. The choice we made is mangroves, because they are the plants that capture the most carbon in the world, and because we have an extended carbon mangrove in Madagascar for about 1 million hectares that we have in Madagascar for now. So we want to restore or manage the existing mangroves to help all the countries, all the 4 countries, to reduce or to capture the emission that they are doing, that they are making. So as stated already in the first presentation made by Joseph, these carbon are quantified in terms of tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. So these are calculated from a formula that Joseph was sharing. And the last part of the project would be to certify the carbon credits, but we found out during this pilot that it's going to be it's quite complicated just using this project, because it's just 50 hectares instead of 250 hectares. I will talk a little bit more about this later in the presentation, but we can see the map now. So as you can see, here's the southwest part of Madagascar. So we are going to do the mangrove plantation in the mouth of the river called Unla. It's about 30 kilometers from Tuléar, the main city that is around. We chose this site because of the importance of local biodiversity and the importance of local ecosystems. Indeed, the mouth of Unla River is rich of biodiversity, including crabs, shrimp, but as well flamingo, which is one of the most vulnerable birds in the world that are nesting in the area where we're going to plant the mangroves. So we're going as well to preserve the ecosystem, to preserve those birds. So there is still some activity that needs to be done. The most important one, actually. Next slide, please. So these are the tree nursery that we implement in Saint-Augustin. This is the name of the place. So these are mangrove seedlings after 4 weeks of plantation in the tree nursery. And we have implemented 4 tree nursery in this area to be able to have enough seedlings for the 50 hectares of plantation. So the next step that we have to do now, prior the actual plantation, is, as Joseph and Anna said before, this project as a pilot is also for us a learning, and part of the learning is to make sure that to submit, or at least to prepare the documents for registration at Plan Vivo Foundation. So we are now finalizing the project idea note, which is the main document that needs to be submitted to the third party organization that will register, where we're going to register the carbon credits. And the next step, after we finalize the PIN and document the PIN for the entire network, is to plant the mangroves. So this will be done with the community in Saint Augustin, and part of our outcome of this project is for them to be able to have a long-term tree nursery, so that they can feed the community with enough seedlings to restore, protect the existing ecosystems. ADRA Madagascar commit as well to do monitoring and evaluation of this activity, not just during the life of the project, but after the life of the project, so that we are able to have a better understanding of the activity to be conducted. What are the limitations? What are the lessons learned? Best practice that we are going to find with this one, and the final outcome of this project in Madagascar is that we are now working with ERWG to upscale the activity that we are conducting with this pilot for another project where we are planning to have 3,000 hectares of mangroves planted in the same region of Madagascar, for us to be able to so that we have the opportunity as well to submit to do a registration with enough surface. Yeah, so that is from Madagascar. Thank you.
Thank you, Rado. And now we will have the time for questions. Let's see.
We had a couple of questions already asked and answered on our chat. How do you? Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So here, let's see. Okay, so this is, you can use this process, or you can just tell me. I have the list of participants here, and anyone has a question, you can address it to the specific person you want. So we have everyone here, I think. Marcus also, the one who is a consultant for us, I think he also joined us as we were in the presentation. Let me just check. Yes, Marcus is with us as well. So you can address questions, any doubts. So yeah, who wants to go first? Yes, Deborah has raised her hand. So yes, you can please speak. Thank you.
Hello, I just wanted to first thank everyone for this excellent presentation. It's very timely, and as has been pointed out, I think there are a lot of lessons we can probably learn from our COVID-19 responses that we can apply toward climate change. I have a question that's probably outside the scope of this project, but as you have experience in this subject in the conversations and negotiations you're having, I'm wondering if you have a suggestion. As an Adventist organization and our affiliation with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, I know that we often lose our spiritual mandate to care for creation in our excitement over the second coming of Jesus. I'm wondering if in the negotiations that these offices have had with the church on how to accommodate climate change efforts, you have any resources you can suggest to help support the arguments that as Christians and in general as followers of God, what supports can we give for the importance of climate change within the spiritual realm, and perhaps in our conversations with the board or with the unions in which we're housed. Any suggestions you might have would be very welcome.
Okay, thank you, Deborah, for your question. Personally, I haven't. I haven't thought of it from that perspective. Now that you brought it up, it's something that I can think about. But I haven't thought about it from a religious perspective, like how you're going to convince, for example, the church or the union, wherever you're based in. So that is something that I would look into, but I haven't. I can't give you anything at the moment to say, okay, you can use this resource or that resource at the moment. So I'm really not sure of that now. Maybe somebody else from the project or from somebody else who is present here has a suggestion.
Yeah, not a suggestion, but I just basically support Deborah's argument. We recently got in touch in Germany with the youth department of our church, who also interested in making our church in Germany carbon neutral, and we are facing the same issue because the first step for our carbon neutral strategy is awareness, to explain to people why is it needed, does it make sense, why do we want to invest our resources there. And for the church, awareness step seems to be even more important, because for ADRA, more or less all of us somehow understand, because we work in the projects and we see implication of the climate change. But of our church, this need seems to be greater in Germany. So we will look into that, and I think we can share soon with you something, but we don't have anything yet.
Joseph? Hello?
Marcus, please go ahead, we can hear you.
Yes, maybe there is something that can be said concerning the church and its standpoint towards climate change. And there has been a number of statements and official statements of the church concerning climate change and environment in connection with stewardship of the earth. And I have mentioned them in my first, in a note. There are especially 4 statements of the church that are the base that can be taken as the basis of climate change actions. If you want, I can read maybe one of them, like which has been the latest that has been done is from 1996, and that is called Stewardship of the Environment. It is the belief of the Seventh-day Adventist Church that humankind was created in the image of God and is thus to represent God as his steward and to manage the natural environment in a faithful and fruitful way. Nature is a gift of God, and so on. Now, so this is a little bit longer, but if somebody is interested, it can be shared. These 4 statements. It's a kind of basis that can be given why also the Seventh-day Adventist Church should be active in the area of climate change.
Okay.
Marcus, can you send us these quotes? We will look at them and disseminate it. That would be great, because I think people want to see a
Yeah, I will just right now send it to Joseph. Maybe Joseph can.
Okay.
Joseph, actually, you have it already.
Yes. I just looked at it. Yes, thank you. I will distribute it.
These are 4 bigger statements of the church, officially statements that have been approved and voted by the General Conference.
Yes.
And I think this is a good basis for a basis for activities in the area of climate change, also for ADRA.
Okay, thank you, Marcus. Next, Prakash wants to ask a question. Please go ahead, Prakash.
It's not a question, it's basically a suggestion on the church engagement.
Sure.
I mean, for any kind of awareness and advocacy, we need an evidence. And I think this pilot project itself, the outcome would be a very good evidence that can be used as a tool, to convince as well as to raise awareness in the church. So probably I think it's too early during the project period. I don't know how it will be really used, but I think once the outcome is generated from this project, that would be a very good evidence and tools.
Thank you, Prakash. We have in the final sort of evaluation, the final workshop, but we will look to go, as you request, and our church and the colleagues working with the church, into more awareness, how to make outcome to be in a better awareness for the church. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prakash. And anyone else want to ask the next question? Yes, Alexander Hirata, please go ahead.
Sure. I had a quick question. Do any of the offices participating in this pilot program report their greenhouse gas emissions to the public, such as in annual reports? I asked just because, we're always eager to say what we have done, the good we've done, and it might add a measure of, accountability if we can also say, by the way, this is the impact of this work on the environment.
Thank you.
Germany, it is
Yes.
sorry,
please.
Germany, it is not have been done yet, but we were discussing with our communication department in doing this. We would like to have, so 2018 we have, but we would like to have 2019 as an end line for this project, so we can maybe publish this and show comparison. But probably we would like to continue with the yearly calculation of emissions for the admin, and yes, we had this idea to post them. Another thing is here to calculate the carbon footprint of our office together with the projects. This would be actually ideal, because people really want to know how much carbon footprint we and our offices have. This is a little bit bigger, complicated task that we are working now. I think this will be more interesting for the public with the projects.
Okay, thank you, Anna.
Maybe in addition to that, sorry, Joseph.
Yes, sure.
So ADRA Madagascar is so one of the projects that we are implementing now with Food for Peace. We committed to do that, to share the information with USAID. That is probably going to be public. Of course, this is interesting as well for USAID or other funding partners, because it shows them our intention to, or our commitment to address some of the climate change, which is one of the requirements now for a lot of donors to have at least a commitment to address some part of climate change. So maybe in those reports we can as well add, not just for the public, but for the donors as well, which is one of the most important things for project that we are running.
Okay, thank you, Rado, as well. Anyone has the next question, please?
And towards this question, again, this is precisely the exercise that is done now with this project is precisely because of public sharing of what is happening concerning carbon emission and reduction and mitigation of carbon emission, and that offices do this in a standardized way. So that is precisely the purpose and one of the main objectives of this exercise. So that if it is done in a standardized way, so that is that this is now possible even to report and to report on websites or on a formal report how are the carbon emissions developing during in the following years, and what was done and how successful concerning mitigation of these emissions.
Thank you, Marcus. Yes, Alex.
I have another question. I'm wondering about how it is to get staff buy-in to the project. So just a quick background, ADRA International, where I work, has maybe over 120 people. And our finance team, it seems, works full time just to get people to turn in their expense reports after a trip. It's weeks of emails and follow-up visits and calls. And so something like having them track, their greenhouse gas emissions from a trip, flights or, miles traveled by road, etc., I think would be a really difficult thing. I know you said that awareness raising was a part of this. Was that enough to get staff buy-in, or did you have to do more to get them want to become involved?
I think it's a process. The some methods that we use, except of awareness, it is some notes. For example, we were posting some little notes in our kitchen about restricting plastics, single-use plastics for a month. We had this initiative in our office. Or we were planning to put some stickers or some notes in the kitchen how to better sort the waste so people actually can see things. We also do weekly updates for the people to remind them that we exist, that we would appreciate if they could contribute, if they could do something. We're also looking at maybe some activities together as an office. Something like making this garden or something else, but there is no, I'm afraid there is no the answer that could immediately make everyone engage. It is like awareness, it takes time, but I would say a reminder, the frequent reminder is a way in our experience, and maybe active engagement. For example, the way how it works in ADRA Germany is I'm thankful that we have 6 people committee. And these 6 people, they're from the different department, and so we have buy-in at least with 1 person in each department. I mean, not for every department we have more, but in quite in 6 of our departments, which is great. So the person in the department can maybe share with other people in the department, and I would say diversity in the committee also plays a role. That's our experience in ADRA Germany.
Thank you, Anna. Anyone else with a question? Please feel free to unmute. And yes, Alex, again.
Sorry, I'll stop asking questions.
No worries, no worries. This is just for the session for you.
It's a question about the greenhouse gas emissions that are calculated for each office. I know you discussed like there's a process to getting carbon credits verified for the plot in Madagascar for planting mangroves. But my question is more about the other emissions calculations that you do. Is there some sort of third party that can verify these emissions? Sort of like a financial audit, just to ensure there's no conflicts of interest, or there's another entity checking to make sure that these are more or less accurate? Or is this just something right now that offices or organizations are trusted to do kind of on their own?
So if you decide to register your project with one of the organizations, like for example, we choose Plan Vivo in this project, there is also gold standards and several others. Marcus knows more of them. But basically, if you register with this organization, you pay for registration and you also pay for verification, financial and on-site. So basically, they check your finances and they go there and look at the papers, at the secondary documents, and in the field. I think once a year. So in this project, we are doing mock exercise, meaning that we are registering with Plan Viva with the documents and with the templates, because they require quite comprehensive registration and number of the documents. But we don't pay for the registration and verification because we only planted 50 hectares. But we are in discussion now with ADRA Madagascar, because as Rado said, they received or probably going to receive the project with ADRA UK, where they're going to replant 3,000 hectares. Then the registration will make sense. And if we pay for the registration, we're going to have auditors, environmental auditors coming and checking. I don't know, Marcus, do you want to give a little bit more technical details on how it is going?
Maybe it's maybe good to distinguish first the 2 things that we are doing with this project. It is first, we with a standardized method, we are trying to estimate our carbon emissions of an office. That means of these 4 offices, of these different 4 offices. And we have developed a kind of tool. That tool was developed on the basis of a standardized methodology that is used by many other, or by, I can say, most of other offices and private entities, corporations, to estimate and to calculate their carbon emissions. So we are using a standardized way to do it. And then later, a different thing is, of course, now offsetting, reducing, and after reducing, after we have managed maybe to reduce it with some methods, whatever is left, we are now looking at how to offset those carbon emissions in order to become carbon neutral. So this can be done, or this must be done, of course, also in a standardized way, so that that it is verifiable what actually how many carbon dioxide was actually emissions were actually offset, were reduced by certain projects. And in order to verify this, there are, as Anna already said, there are a number of institutions that help you to register the project and to certify those carbon offsets. And that is again done in a standardized way with a lot of requirements. They have their documentation, what is needed, how a project needs to be done in order to be able to first register and later on also to certify the amount of carbon reductions that is done with those activities of the project. So I don't know if I have answered your question a little bit.
Yeah, you did somewhat. So I was asking less about the carbon offsets and more just about how carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions are measured, at each office.
Okay.
And you covered that a little bit with a standard tool, right, based on what kind of the systems that others are using was used.
Yeah, we have developed a tool, and this tool was developed on certain standards that are internationally recognized and employed in all other corporations also. But only that we are doing it in a voluntary way. We do not, but other corporations need to do it, by law to estimate, and we have used the same standards as those corporations also use.
Just a feedback to what Mark was saying, that there is two different types of carbon credits. There is the by law required from the government carbon credits that were agreed on during the Paris meeting, and there is a voluntary one. And so we are working in the field of the voluntary credits. So we are not demanded by law by the government, but we use them. And the moment these different types of credits, they cannot be mixed, but in the future they can be all put together. And so, for example, some government institution could potentially buy from us. Let's say, right now it is two different streams.
Okay, the next question, anyone?
I have a question to Rado, if he's still there. I mean, we are from the same project, but in our project, we are looking to develop a strategy how to make projects carbon neutral and step-by-step guide. But I understand that Rado already started with ADRA Madagascar. Can you share with Rado, how are you making your projects carbon neutral? Do you have already some paper that you developed? Because then we could use it for this project, or what are your main actions there?
So yes, I'm still here, Anna. So we are just starting the project actually, and in the new process for peace, we have that refine year where we are just thinking. So during this first year, we are going to start writing some step-by-step process to be followed by the project team. But it includes, for example, that each of the activity that we are going to put in place will have some environmental thinking to be able for us to measure from the beginning the potential emission of each activity. Also, we are going to document a little bit more our fleet, our operation, including cars, flight, helicopter that we are using for the project. So this will be well documented, but for now we don't have yet the step-by-step step. But the only thing that have been done, and I believe that this is principal thing to be done in this kind of project is to write in the proposal that we are going to do that, and make sure that you have enough budget in your project to achieve those ambition of being carbon neutral. Of course, I will share with the network through the TLL the results and documentation that we are going to produce to make sure that projects become carbon neutral. I don't know if I respond to your question, Anna.
Yes, I understand that you budgeted for this, but you're still developing it. Yeah, yes, please share, because we also plan to develop something like this for the network, hopefully.
Yes, so we plan to have this a draft of this by the end of the fiscal year for USAID, so in September, because we want this to happen in the project. And the other thing that we do in this project is that thanks to ADRA International, we are able to have a budget from match funds, so that we are actually financing the carbon offsetting activity, not by the donor, but internally as ADRA.
Okay, maybe a small comment again on carbon neutrality. Carbon neutrality, that means that the emissions that an office or a project, I will not talk about project, but office mainly, and the emissions that an office is doing, and after reduction, and now can be offset. That means can I say, the difference between the emissions and the reductions, the total emission, they need to be offset. This offsetting is probably not easy to do for a project, because in projects you have to always have emissions and different kinds of emissions of constructions, of the operations of a project, and so on. So you might not be able to, within a project, to offset all carbon emissions, but in total, that means all operations of office and projects and so on, you can look at offsetting the total of carbon emissions. But for a single project, it might be not possible to do. You can only also calculate in a certain way, again, applying certain standards to determine the project's carbon footprint, by estimating again the amount and the kind of emissions of the project construction and the project operations, how much such a project is generating on emissions. But this is done a little bit different than for offices.
And also, in addition to that, maybe one of the most important thing in trying to have a carbon neutral project is that the office needs to commit for long term, because the project has time and end at some point, but the office will potentially remain there. So even if we're doing the office, the country office, have to take the carbon neutrality or the actions to be taken, and the commitment needs to be done not by the project but by the country office.
Okay, thank you, Rado, Marcus, Anna. Any other questions, please? We have still some more time, maybe 10 more minutes. Can we take a few more questions?
Joseph, where will we be able to find all the resources in the presentation that were discussed and shared today?
These presentations, we can share it with the participant list here, and also we can put it up on ADRA ENET in the Resilience maybe TLL, yeah?
I would suggest to put it in the net and maybe send us all a link so we could share a link.
Okay, sure, we can do that. Any other questions, comments? Okay, so I think for now nobody's nobody has added any more, as one doesn't want to ask any more questions at the moment. We have a technical consultant here, Marcus, with us. So if anything related to the calculation or the calculator itself, which he helped to develop, you can ask questions as well. Sure, yes, Alex.
Crystal? Sorry.
Yes, Crystal, please, go ahead.
Hi, Crystal Westray from ADRA Canada. I'm actually calculating our carbon footprint for last year. And
Okay.
I don't have this calculator that Marcus has created. I've been using My Climate website and another one of the websites that was suggested in the process. But what I'm finding is the calculations, for example, for the paper, I have some calculations that I have weight. We use pounds or kilograms, and then I have other things that are by cost, which I find can pose a problem with accuracy. So what is the calculation that Marcus has created? What are you using?
We can share with you the calculator, but basically we're using the emission factor, and emission factor is different for the different measurements. For example, for electricity or for the natural gas, for specific type, we had a specific way of calculation, a specific factor. And so what Marcus created is more customized calculator, because the My Climate is very general. Use some kind of emission factor that may be not applicable to your country or to your situation, whereas we are using more precise ones. So basically in our calculator you have a list of factors and you need to choose one that is more applicable to your situation, to the measurement. Marcus, do you have any comment?
Yes, no, it will be also applicable everywhere worldwide, internationally. The basic thing is, of course, the activity multiplied by the emission factor will finally give you the carbon emission. So as you define your activity, and we have to define those activities specifically for also for paper and for those kind of, or for different kind of things, you will be able to do that also in there. Of course, there might be issues with that you have to convert from pounds into kilogram, but that is not a problem. That is just a conversion. That is just a conversion issue, and otherwise, yes, as Anna said, the emissions are always calculated by applying an activity to an emission factor. So the crucial thing is this emission factor that must fit to the activity that you have defined. This emission factor is found everywhere on the website. There are now a number of sources where you can buy also documents with new emission factors, but they are quite expensive. So I have used emission factors from DEFRA, that is in England, the government organization that have issued emission factors and are continuing issuing emission factors for the next years. So also the tool can be updated with these new emission factors. But basically, it's yes. If you, we can send you the original tool and then the latest tool, and you will see in the introduction it will give you an idea how to go forward to use the tool, and you will also understand what we did there, and in defining those activities.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Alex, you had something to say, something to ask before we wrap up?
Yes, this is just a quick one, and I apologize if I missed this from somewhere in the presentation. But is there like a margin of error built into the carbon emissions calculator or tool that you're using? Because the impact of each flight or car trip, etc., is just an estimate. And then even now things like employees are using their home electricity or gas as part of their work, right? So technically, like a portion of that would be part of ADRA's emissions. So I'm just wondering if built into the calculator is like a that kind of margin of error, or that allows for that kind of difference?
The methodology that we have used does not use a margin of error, but it also specifies, as you said, that it is an estimation. So you can use, of course, different methods in order to calculate the, for example, the emissions from your flights. So the best how is this done is always to use an emission factor that is conservative. That means that is a little bit estimating rather than underestimating, to be on the more conservative side. And that is what we have done with this tool. Of course, it is an estimation. There is nothing like a precision of point and after the comma, but it's also probably not an accurate thing even on 1 ton of carbon. Maybe it differs, but I think that is not very important in this context. Even if you have, even if you calculate, for example, your total emission is maybe 114 or 150 tons of carbon dioxide equivalents, or if it is 114 or 116 tons, that doesn't really is not very important. Important is it's approximately how much, and very important is that you use all the time the same methods year by year, so that it's possible to estimate about if you have if you are successful with a little bit reducing year after year, or how are your development of your carbon emissions for the during the next years. So more important is than accuracy is that the methods are used consistently in the same way, and also the data collection is done in the same way, so that these numbers remain comparable between the offices, but then also within an office from year to year. It's an estimation. It's not 100% accurate, because there are very different methods out there. They come to approximately the same results, but they differ also. We have used a kind of where possible, always a conservative emission factor.
I think for the COVID situation, we will calculate the margin of error for the months when all our employees were in home office. But for this one, we will probably show the one that is the measurements show and the margin of error, because I mean it's 2-3 months falling completely out, and of course our NI will be great, but we will also probably going to look into margin of error for COVID.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Marcus. So I think now we've already run out of time. So I want to thank each one of you for attending this webinar. I hope it has been useful for you, and we will post these materials on the ADRA ENET through the ADRA RTLL group. And please feel free to reach out to any of us who's involved in this project. And yeah, thank you once again.